Hey YouTube and podcasting world, it's Fancy Quant, and today we are going to talk a little bit about career development. More specifically, I'm going to dive in just to my experiences, things that I have done, kind of principles I have followed for leaving jobs, for looking for opportunities, for not burning bridges, right? But kind of how I've developed my career to this point, and a lot of things I've thought about, I've been careful of, things that might have backfired a bit. And how to kind of control your career solely from a career development perspective here. So for those of you that don't really know me or this channel somewhat, everything is going to be focused around quantitative finance, risk management, right? This is what I do. This is who I am. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is going to be transferable to other jobs, other careers. Again, just being human, I think, is part of career development. I don't think a lot of people quite realize that. So let's start off with my first job. Okay, you're out of college, or in my case, you're out of graduate school, you have your master's, you get the first job. Once you have the first job though, you need to focus on multiple things here. So a lot of people start diving into the obvious, right? You're on the job, you're new, regardless if it's your first job or your 10th job, you need to learn the job, right? You need to jump in and figure things out. So a lot of times you're gonna have experience doing something. And so even like new companies though, they have different processes, different procedures. But the thing is, you're going to be focusing on the job. The most important aspect, at least one of the important parts here, is building relationships with the people around you. And we'll talk about this in a few parts, but I've been at many jobs where I've started the job and I've had two scenarios. I've never had three. I've only had two. I either thought everybody I was going to work with was going to be very, very smart, and I was excited for this and pretty pumped up, or I interviewed, the job looked good for other reasons, and I thought the people I'd be working with would not be very bright, and this was going to be a challenge and a sticking point. But in both scenarios, if you end up working well with others and building relationships, you'll start finding out again, working with people is the most important aspect of any job anywhere. And so when I had this negative attitude and I came in, and so my job is mainly focused around quantitative analytics. So a lot of us are all geared towards who's really smart, how do you get things done, right? You know, there's kind of like this beat your chest, who's the smartest person in the room kind of attitude. But again, knowing people, meeting people, learning people's strengths and weaknesses. So you'll start finding out, especially if you're new and you're in quantitative finance, you might be a genius in one area and you're super bright, and then you find out there are other skills and other abilities that you are just terrible on, and it's really important to realize that from the beginning because you can strengthen these skills and kind of build who you are as a person. But also, this is a time, I think, to kind of appreciate the people around you and realize, like, you know, this person is hired to do job X, Y, and Z, and he's definitely not as good at me at, you know, these skills, and I'm so great and wonderful, right? Stroking your own ego here. But at the same time, realizing like, wow, like this person is just, for example, communication. They work well with others. We had really bad news to deliver. They delivered it. They went through this process, and I'm just like shocked how it turned out, right? They have other skills. There's all these other skills. And even on the quantitative side, right, you might be an expert. So for example, I love time series. I'm probably one of the experts in the industry on time series. I haven't met anyone else who's came quite to my marks on what time series is, how to implement it and everything. But when I jumped into a new role at one of my new jobs, I started working in credit risk. So credit risk is different than time series. There's, you know, standard statistics. So things I'd kind of seen, I had an inkling of how it was done, but I'd never really done it. And then I came across a colleague of mine who had been doing this for a long, long time. Very motivated individual, could just dive in, get things done, very organized, processed everything. Like they were just on top of it and they knew things in and out. For me, that wasn't my expertise. So it took some time to catch up. It's important, again here, so back to the original point of building these relationships with people, figuring out what their strengths are and trying to leverage them. If you're a manager, this is even more important as you're essentially being paid to do this. So if you have a team of, say, 4 people or 12 people or 24 people, it's important to kind of figure out each and every employee, spend time with them, which I don't see a lot of managers doing on the kind of bigger business side. But you need to take the time and the effort and get to know people and be able to leverage their skills, but also in a manager perspective, be able to train them to enhance them, right? But back to the original story here, right? When you start your first job or you start a job, it's important to get to know everybody around you. Okay. And I know it's going to be disheartening in many cases because you'll meet new people and you'll realize you don't really like people for some reason. They rub you the wrong way. There have been people that I've met that I don't like and I still just don't like, and we just never get along, and it's okay. Just make peace with that, be professional. Don't really let it show that much. It's not important. But again, if you get to know the people around you, you'll find out that working together as a team is important because you'll be working with these people at minimum 40 hours a week. So if you don't like them, you don't get along with them, it's going to make your job a living nightmare. So knowing the people around you and building relationships in a career to get ahead is very important. Now, to build on top of that, getting to know your manager and building a relationship with your manager is important because they're going to be the person that is more or less responsible for 50% of your promotion, where your work and effort is realistically the other 50%. So the reason I say this is you could be, a knockout all-star employee, right? Best of the best, cream of the crop, number one in the industry. And you could be just doing all the work, twice as much work, right? On time, on budget, managing people, working multiple positions above you, taking care of things. But at the end of the day, if your manager doesn't see that, or your manager for some reason doesn't like you, that causes issues. And at the end of the day, when you go for promotions, it's usually your manager who's pushing for who should get promoted, who should get pay increases, things like that. But they have to do that with their boss or their boss's boss. And so to be able to push you for a promotion, you really need to build a case with your manager and build that relationship. And so over the years, I have done this. I have worked on this. It's been challenging. Some managers I just click with instantly. So, we just sit down, we start talking, we work together. Things turn out really great. Other managers have been more of a struggle where it's like they're more either standoffish, meaning they don't really want to get to know you as much. I don't know why, but it happens. Or you have managers that are just too busy. So a lot of times you have a manager, you want to get to know them more, you want to work with them more. But again, they're doing more of a manager role. They're expecting you to do things and just handle it, which I really like. But a lot of times you just don't get that interaction. And so it's important to kind of build an actual relationship, not a fake one, but just like a professional relationship on, getting things done, communication styles. I've had a lot of managers who I don't communicate well with. And so I take that to heart and try to figure out why is this not working and how can I adjust my end to make it happen? Never expect somebody else to make the effort. It's just not good policy. And the thing is, you can control you can't control other people. So building these relationships with colleagues, building them with managers will make your career and your career develop far better. Again, don't be one of those people that lies or slacks or doesn't do your job very well. Even if it's acceptable, you will get that label and people will know that. And so one of the things I like to think about is that essentially you make your career on the days that no one's watching. You don't make your careers on the big projects. And I know this seems, somewhat backwards for what a lot of people think, right? Everyone wants to get assigned that really big project, and then they want to do really well, and then they want the impact because let's say the CEO and CRO are going to see this project and your name's going to be on it, and maybe you'll get an award and a promotion and all this stuff. But what I have found is that the way it works is when you're not paying, when no one else is watching you, you're at work, you're by yourself, you're getting things done. If you are constantly motivated and you're doing your best and you're getting things done and you work well with people around you, right, and you're not making a big deal about it, people notice. They start kind of recording this in their memory over time that, Dimitri is this awesome employee. He communicates well. He works well with others. He gets his job done. I don't know. He's some all-star. I don't know. There are all these characteristics they think about you, right? And there's obviously going to be negative things too, like, well, I like working with Dimitri, but maybe he doesn't communicate very well. Or, maybe when he thinks he's right and he's hard to explain the truth to, right? It's hard to convince him and change his mind, which is somewhat true for me. And so you build these relationships, right? And these impact, again, who gets that big project or that big promotion. Because what ends up happening is they say, okay, this project's going to be this type of project. It's a big project. It's high profile. We don't want to screw this up, right? Because your manager's going to look bad, or your manager's manager is going to look bad if it goes under. So you need to put the best of the best on these big projects. The way to get on those big projects, the way to make those career moves, again, is just being consistent over time, showing up on time, getting your work done, going above and beyond. So in general, right, you need to perform your best essentially on your worst days when no one else is watching. I have seen colleagues who suck up and make a big deal about it to senior management when everybody's involved. And then when things don't really happen and we're kind of slower, we're just like the daily grind, things are going, they don't really pull their weight. And when that ends up happening is that managers see this, they know this, or if not, right, they might ask people and say, hey, I'm thinking about putting Dimitri on this project. Maybe he hasn't performed very well. What do you guys think? Do you think he can do it? Do you think he can't do it? Should we, who should we pull for this project? Other people, other colleagues are going to talk and put their input in on this. And if you just slack, right, it's just not going to help you out. So you need to be consistent. You need to be productive. Again, just be an overall all-star here and try to be a great employee. Don't try doing this where you slack. It just doesn't work out real well. All right, so that's just kind of the basics here of getting the job, getting going. Again, learning your job technically, but really working on those relationships and building them, building friendships. One thing that I spend some time on the relationship part is trying to figure out what everybody's interests are. So it's important to learn the interests of the people around you. This is one of the keys for me where it makes it easier to interact and work with people. For example, I have a few different colleagues over the years, managers, colleagues, people at different levels below me, whatever. But some of them have hobbies in traveling, right? I'm not the biggest fan of traveling. I do travel occasionally. But again, take interest in this. It's easy to look things up online, talk about them. For example, I'm going on a trip to Hawaii. That's what I was doing at one point. So I asked my colleague who had been to Hawaii and all the different islands, getting his opinion, his advice, building those relationships on commonalities. Another one is I had another colleague who went to the same university as me, so University of Michigan. They were from Michigan State, though, not the exact same university. But again, having that bond and being able to talk sports with them, talk about Michigan, talk about the atmosphere, when they would go home to see, friends and family, it's like, oh man, how's Michigan doing? Did you go to any games? Because they'd still go to University of Michigan football games, for example. But having that relationship, and I think that's why a lot of times people unfairly either hire people from the same alumnus, so the same universities, or they just have better relationships because they went to similar experiences. But again, I think if you spend enough time getting to know your colleagues and finding commonalities, it makes it easy to know, like, hey, this employee and me have this shared interest, and so we focus on, traveling. One of my other colleagues, we talk a lot about gardening, for example, and plants, because they have a PhD in forestry. And I like to garden as a hobby. I'm not educated in that way, but we talk about it. So we talk about science and, honeybees and beekeeping. And I'm interested in forestry and how they model things from a work perspective, but I'm also interested in growing different types of plants, and they're from another country. So we talk about, different types of plants and fruits and things to grow that grow in our local atmosphere. But again, learning to take those commonalities and find those roots will make your job process a lot easier and will help you get ahead in a career. Now, let me just lay this out here. This is not sucking up to people. This is not creating fake friendships. Again, I spend 40 plus hours a week with these people. You're going to spend 40 plus hours a week with people, right? If you don't like them, it's going to be a miserable job. And it's one thing you should consider, which we're going to talk about here. If you should stay at a job, if you should take a job, if you should leave a job, right? If you don't get along with the culture and it makes the job miserable, even if you like the work, a lot of times that can ruin it. So building these relationships, again, helps on the promotion side, but it also helps with your just daily mental sanity and enjoying what you're doing as a career and as a job. All right, now the second topic we're really going to talk about here. So we talked about kind of just relationship building, right? That's a lot of it. Working hard, making sure you get your job done. Something I didn't quite mention a lot on is self-learning. So I'm big on self-learning. Some companies absolutely hate when you do it at the office. But I think you should be learning on the side more about your industry and your job, even if it's not directly related, because eventually you're going to get put in positions where you can leverage that information. So build a relationship side for promotions and making your life just fun and enjoyable and building some camaraderie and a family atmosphere here, right, which I've had. And then also, work on those technical skills or your job skills over time as well, because that also helps you get promoted on the technical side. So there's the technical side, and there's the relationship side. You need to make both sides happen if you want to get promoted. And if you just want to find an enjoyable career and job in general, is just making sure kind of it all fits. But let's talk about now, let's say you've worked at a company, but you're thinking about a new job, right? So things that I like to think about, things that I have thought about in the past on why I leave jobs, really comes down to a few factors. The first one, again, is the environment. So the environment is a very, very large and broad topic. It can be anything from the colleagues you work with to the management that you work for, but it can also be things like, for example, maybe the work environment doesn't fit you. So I absolutely can't stand when I work at offices and it's noisy. I don't like when you have the flat cultural environment where everyone can see you and hear you, and it's just like, I don't know, it's chaos. It makes no sense for quants. For business people and those who work in teams, this might be a big plus, and you might be trying to do that and trying to find somewhere like that. But for a lot of quants, it's a negative environment. But again, quiet desks, IT is a huge thing for, at least in my job. I absolutely can't stand working with IT at some companies because different companies have different IT structures. Some are more helpful and think things through. Other ones are just complete unplanned, unorganized chaos. And so you might be thinking, well, who really cares you don't work in IT? Well, it makes your job more difficult because then it puts hurdles in your way. And then if you have all these extra hurdles to go through, it becomes somewhat of a nightmare. And then it makes your job essentially more or less like a IT manager who's unofficial because now you're babysitting and trying to fix all these problems that IT can't figure out just so you can do your job. So that's part of the environment. Senior management, the drive, the message they send. So a lot of senior management, CEOs, CROs, CFOs, I don't know, all these executives, they don't realize, I think, a lot of times that they set a somewhat the culture and the attitude of the business. And this is something you should consider, right? If their goals align with your goals and you want to essentially have a long run career and get promoted through the system, is would you be happy in one of those senior roles? If you don't like those people and they're taking it the wrong direction, right? Even if you get bumped into a really high role, a lot of the people around you are going to still retain that company culture. And so it's going to be extremely challenging to change. And so one reason you might leave a company, again, based on the environment here, is you might see other companies with other employees that have similar ideologies that would fit with yours. But again, you see a lot of things you could fix and change and work with and improve so you could add value. But looking at that, cultural fit, management fit, the long run strategy is also an important factor for the environment. The second one's going to be the main one, which everybody's going to think about. That's going to be your compensation. So what is your base salary? What is your bonus, right? That's what everyone thinks right up front. But you need to start looking at things a little more granular. And I'll give an example on why this is important when I tell a story here about leaving my first job. But you need to think about healthcare. Right? So insurance, health insurance, life insurance, things like that come as extra benefits. Other benefits might be working from home. Do they allow you to work from home? Do they not allow you to work from home? Do they have on-site daycare? A lot of companies don't. Some companies do, right? There's all these little perks and benefits that you need to look at. Do they have a happiness consultant, for example, at this company, right? Are there people there that are trying to make things easy for you, right? These are all weird things that you don't really think about, but when you start factoring them in, they can make a huge difference in your actual total compensation. And so thinking about that compensation from a bigger picture is important, and I'll tell you why. So a little bit of a story here to kind of encapsulate some of what we've been talking about. When I left my first job, I started this job. I really liked all the people involved in the company, the business, right? People on my team specifically, people outside of my team that we interacted with. I just really liked the culture. I liked the people. It felt very comfortable and more like a family to me. And so I stayed there for, I think, about 13 months, maybe 14 months, and I really enjoyed it. And so now you're asking, right, why did you leave? That's going to be the big question here. And so I started looking at the company, though, and started realizing I liked the people. I liked the work. I liked that they were driven towards learning and education and academics, right? It all kind of fit who I was. But the one thing that didn't really fit me was the fact that the company culture is designed and structured more on a seniority of how long you've been somewhere. So how long have you been at the company? If you've sat in this position for 4 years, you're promotion eligible. If you have not sat this company for 4 years, right, you've only been here for 2, you're not eligible. So this guy that has more time, more experience, he'll get the promotion, you won't. It's just how it works, right? It's just the company culture. I didn't like that. I was not someone that wanted to sit somewhere at a company for a really, really long time unless I saw a very clear path that I could navigate. Like there was a possibility of me going through the ranks, being promoted, being an associate director, being a director, senior director, right? Either partner or like an executive, CRO, for example, or head of validation, head of, model development. I want a path. I want to be able to move forward. Even if it's not going to be very quick, at least I see something there. With this company, I just didn't see it, right? There's a lot of people around me. A lot of them had been there 15 plus years. So for me to get to their positions, I have to wait for them to move on, and they have to wait for the person above them to move on. And it's just going to take time. I didn't see, for example, so looking at company, are they going to be expanding? I didn't see any opportunity for the corporation or the divisions to expand, so there wouldn't be like empty pockets where you could kind of move forward in. It just wasn't there for me. And so I didn't really actively start looking, but I started having a lot of recruiters reach out to me and they started saying, Dimitri, what about this job? What about this other job? Why don't you go here? And I'm like, I'm just not interested, right? They were paying a little bit more at these other companies, but I didn't want to do it, right? I enjoyed my team. I enjoyed the work I was doing. I had an awesome cubicle. I had a really cool cubicle when I started, but they downsized me due to moving and logistics and all that. But I had a cubicle and it was quiet and I liked the people I worked with. I liked my manager. Everything worked out well. One of the other grinds was they ended up putting someone between me and my actual manager, and she was my new manager, which I put in air quotes. She was not a good manager. She was demanding. She couldn't manage me. She couldn't get anything done. And so at the end of the day, we ended up fighting a lot. And so it just ended up towards the end of it. And that was more or less the breaking point for me because I actually applied for that manager job. And since I didn't get the job, I was fine. But then the fact that this new manager was going to be so demanding and couldn't actually manage people, it was just clear to me that she was put there based on seniority and not on actual experience. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's just how some company cultures roll. As I get older, I start to actually value that a little bit more than I value like the promotion path and like the fast moving, based on their merit, which is fine. I still like that, but it is kind of nice sometimes to have like a solid, stable place to work. You'll be there for the long run. But when that came down, that was just the breaking point for me. And at the same time, I had kind of like some people contacting me, but I wasn't super actively looking. Somebody called up and said, hey, this is one of the biggest names in the consulting business. They want you to interview. So come on over, like take this call, please. We're going to pay you a lot. And I was like, I don't know. I still like my job. I still like my team. But again, now I have this new manager that's really grinding me. She's yelling and screaming. She's throwing tantrums. It's just not a good fit for me. I don't want to deal with this. I didn't see any way out of it. So what I ended up doing is I took the call. I talked to them on the phone for a while and they said, this is the job. This is the compensation. You'll essentially be making double what you're making now, but you'll be working 50 hours a week. So like, okay. And like, it's one of the biggest names in consulting. You'll be moving to New York City. It'll just be an amazing opportunity. You're going to interview with like 3 or 4 people. So I'm like, all right, great. Like I'm not counting anything yet because I haven't got the offer. I took a phone call, I think it was a video chat with the first guy, interviewed with him. Things went really well, pretty simple. I explained out some technical concept. They agreed, they went through it, they were fine. And then finally, I interviewed with, I believe it was the CEO of that division. Things went well, they liked me. And I think I ended up interviewing with one of our clients for that consulting firm as well. They liked me, things went well, my resume passed. It went super fast. There was just video call, and then it was like an offer came in. But when the offer came in, what they were saying originally was you're going to be working directly for the consulting firm, you're going to be making all this money. But now they're like, well, you're going to be working for technically a contract position. So you'll be a contractor, but we're going to push you over full time to the consulting firm. So it's just kind of a like transition period to get you onto the payroll and onto the board, and we need you within like a few weeks or whatever. So I'm like, all right, awesome. So I went through all this process and I did it all. And I won't talk about it in too much detail because I could tell 100 stories on this. But anyways, for me, that was the consideration here, was just looking at, okay, it's essentially double the salary. That's a big bonus for me. There is going to be a massive consulting firm who's one of the top rated on my resume. That's a second really good opportunity for me. And third, I've always wanted to work in New York City. I've wanted to work on Wall Street, which I ended up doing with this contract. But it worked out well. So it's like, this is like a home run for me. It looks like it's amazing. I don't see any downfalls with this. Yeah, I'll be on contract for a short period, but I'm going to be pushed on full time. Like, this is going to be great. So, and then I'm looking at my downside, right? My current job, I like the atmosphere. I like the people. I liked my original boss, but the new one's a little crazy. It's causing issues. I don't see a lot of promotion opportunity for me here. And I'm a young guy. I need to get ahead in my career quickly, right? So I can start vying for those senior management positions at a younger age. And so that was the breaking point, and then I took the offer. So looking at this now from a perspective of after it, the contract wasn't fully honest with me on how the compensation was paid. Again, they did mention that I wouldn't have health benefits as a contractor, but I'd get pushed to full time. When I did end up moving, New York City cost me almost exactly double from what I was making in Dallas. So New York City, Dallas half the cost of New York. But again, I'm in New York City. It's awesome. I'm paying $4,000 a month for rent there, but I'm living in New York City and I loved it. So I don't complain about that. It was amazing. But when you're switching jobs, it's important to look at these aspects. And I realized afterwards, like, my health insurance was expensive, right? It took my pay down quite a bit. And even though I was making really good money, that was a big hit I didn't expect. And I didn't realize how much my health insurance was actually worth. So that was the biggest component for me. Also, I didn't have paid time off. So PTO, vacation days, whatever you want to call it. You just don't have those when you're on contract. And again, I'm not going to mention this one, but there are reasons why there were issues and things weren't working out the way they promised they would work out for the transition onto full-time. But at the end of the day here, right, when you consider switching a job, I think it's important to look at the environmental factors. What's really the reason you are leaving? Like, why don't you like the job? And I think this is really hard to do. Like, you need to stop and think, what is it really? Is it the people, or is it me? Maybe I just don't get along with them. Maybe I can change something and make it better. It is challenging to move jobs. So you don't want to just jump jobs just because you have an issue with somebody. But then at the same time, if the cultural fit's not there, right, and if the work's not what you want it to be, right, you need to start thinking through, what is the exact reason you don't like the job? What is the exact reason that you're not doing this? And I would encourage you to take at minimum at least 1 week, if not 2 to 3 weeks, to really start thinking and writing down on paper, what is wrong? Like, why don't I like this job? Why isn't it a good fit? And then also writing out, what are the things you do like about the job? And I think if you do that before you start looking for a new job, before you start talking to recruiters, you'll have a really solid idea of why you want to leave, but what's also great about this job. So when you get a new offer, you can compare that to something and actually have columns of pros and cons to look at and say, hey, okay, compensation-wise, I'd be making more, I'd be making less, right? Then start digging deeper and saying, well, do I have health insurance? Is it better or worse, right? Try to get a little more detail on that. Paid time off, for example, how much vacation do you get, stuff like that. Start weighing those into the compensation, and then start looking at the culture. Like, are the cultures going to be similar? Again, when you interview with the new companies or the new job offers, you need to ask cultural questions because you want to know if you're going to fit before you get there. It's hard to do, I know, but you need to think about that. And then when you do end up getting a good offer, then you can really compare it and solidly think, based on everything I know at this point, which again, like in my example, there might be unknowns that people don't follow through on, but based on everything you know, are you making the right decision or not? I think that's the important part for making the switch. All right, now that being said, let's talk a little bit about, so we talked about the career, starting the job, getting promotions, being well prepared, technical skills, networking, building relationships, and all that. Then we talked about reasons you would leave a job. Oh, before we get going too far, things I want to talk about on how do you quit a job. So I always provide 2 weeks notice. That's the standard. So I'm always nice, professional, and try to provide you a 2-week notice. That being said, one of the things I do see that people fail on time and time again is do not tell anybody that you are quitting or you are leaving or you're relocating or anything, do not say anything to anybody, no matter what, before your 2-week notice, and then tell your manager first. I can't emphasize that enough. I see this all the time. You burn bridges, you cause issues in the company, then there's turmoil, and there's rumors going around that you're leaving, and then finally by the time you say it, now it feels like you're being stabbed in the back as a manager, because it's like you're telling everybody how terrible the company is, or you're telling everybody, I'm leaving, I have this amazing offer. But again, it just doesn't feel like you really care about the relationship you've built with that manager or that boss. So even my closest of colleagues, I didn't tell. And when I came in, I talked to my boss. I said, hey, again, be professional. Try to keep the relationships intact. Don't burn bridges. But I told them, I've loved working with you over the last last year here. You've taught me a lot. And I could see on her face, that she knew what was coming next. But you're talking through I really appreciated it. I loved the job. I loved the people. I built really strong relationships there. I've kept those relationships over the years. And I still meet with those people and have coffee with them and chat with them, right? They're my friends. I keep them very close to me, right? They're personal friends, not just professional contacts. But delivering the message and saying, hey, I appreciate the opportunity. And again, you might not need to say oh, I don't like the new manager I have, or I don't like the company culture because they're not going to promote me. And that's not important. The important thing is when you quit the job is to sit down and just be honest with them and tell them hey, I appreciate these things. Highlight the things that you liked about the job. And then, mention the main reason why you're leaving, but don't dig on it. Don't make a lot of things. I mentioned, for example, which was true and a big point for me, was that, there's a new opportunity. It's in New York City. It's going to pay me nearly double. I just couldn't turn down the opportunity. And that's really the truth, right? I couldn't turn it down. It was an amazing offer. I've always wanted to work in New York City, but I do really appreciate everything you guys have done for me. And so my boss understood. We already had a fairly good relationship built. And so we were good. So that was that. And then after that, I went and told, my closest colleagues, hey, I just put in my 2 weeks. I'm going to be quitting. And then they're asking where I'm going. And I'm I don't really want to tell you. I don't see anything wrong with telling people where you're going. But a lot of times it's best just not to say anything, at least for, a month or two after you've been at the new company. The reason being is you don't want to create tension either, where it's you tell everybody where you're going and it's amazing and it's great. And then all of a sudden, all those people are looking for jobs at that company. And then everybody ends up going over there. It causes issues for management. It doesn't make you look good in the eyes of your old manager and your old corporation. Again, do not burn bridges where you do not have to. I have had people, so at different companies, not my first one, that I absolutely could not stand. And I did not go out of my way to burn bridges. I did not tell them bad things, right? I've kept relationships open, even though things didn't end on the best terms. You try to keep them as best you can, because you never know when you're going to need a favor. You never know when your paths are going to cross again. You never know. And for example, you're interviewing for a new job and that person might know somebody there. And then they ask and say, hey, I saw they worked at, this company you used to work at. What do you think of them? Right? Just don't burn bridges. And I've seen this, and it's really sad and it's really disheartening. But I've seen people quit the job and they have a better job and they're all lined up and they're going and they basically just flip the bird to the company and they're basically screw you. You guys didn't do me any good. And then they trash the company and then they leave. There's no reason to do this. It does not make you look good. It does not make, the situation seem better. It doesn't really make you feel better. You might feel better when you say it, and then you'll forget and you'll move on and you'll go to your new job and you don't really care. Those people, though, that you're being rude to and mean to, it's just an indication you're not very professional. So just don't do it. Just be professional. Highlight the positives when you put in your 2-week notice. My last 2 weeks, though, at my first job were probably some of the best times I ever had there. And I don't know why. A lot of people don't tell everybody they're leaving till the last day. People think it's better etiquette to do that, and perhaps it is. But I just let a few of my close contacts know I was leaving. Our team and our divisions were so closely self-knit that it just got out. And so people are like, hey, congratulations on the new job. And so I got to know even more people and I networked with more people before I left. And I built stronger relationships with different individuals. And over the years, they have gone to different corporations and they've called me for advice and help. I've called them for advice and help. right? Just not burning bridges and trying to keep your network together and building those relationships is a really important fact here, especially when you quit and put in your 2 weeks. So that's how I would quit, right? Put in the 2 week notice, be professional, thank them for the things they have done for you, highlight a few of the reasons that are not too controversial on why you're leaving. But that's really how you leave the job. Now, that being said, so now talking about the topic I was going to talk about a few minutes ago, is going to be how often should you stay, like how long should you stay at a job? When should you leave? All those opportunities, right? What do you do? I think it's important to understand the dynamics of a career as a whole. So when you start out a career and you come out of school, it's extremely challenging to find a job. And almost everybody knows that, right? You've all been through that, or you're going through that, or you're going to go through that. But it's always really, really hard to get the first job and to get into the industry. After you break into the industry and you start working that first job, like within a few months, I was already getting recruiters calling, emailing, like we have all these offers, these jobs, please come work with us. My industry was hot when I jumped in, so everybody's hiring at that point. And in general, when you're on the, we'll say the individual contributor side of a job, so the non-manager side, when you're doing the work, you'll typically have more job offers, more opportunities. And this is a good time, I think, to kind of jump around from company to company, figure out what you like as an individual, like what culture fits you, what company fits you. But I would try to stay at least a minimum of 1 year. More preferably, I think 2 years is a better indication that you gave it a shot. You worked at the company. You will learn a lot in 2 years. And then at that point, you can jump jobs and try to find something that pays better, maybe has a better cultural fit as we talked about before. But in the beginning of your career, I think it's more acceptable to jump around. There's more opportunities, okay? When you start getting into the manager roles, so when you're like a first or second type manager, there's going to be less opportunities, but you'll still see these opportunities online. You can still apply traditional methods on, going online, going to the websites, finding some recruiters, and then getting the jobs. The important thing, though, is as your career progresses, you should be working, at least in my opinion, longer and longer and longer at each job. If it's not a good fit, right, there's no reason why you shouldn't just jump. Like, it's okay to do that. But again, make sure you have all your reasoning put together, you find a better opportunity, and things work out well. You don't want to just be jumping out of the fire into the frying pan, essentially, where you didn't think it through and you have now a worse opportunity and you're in a worse position. But anyways, as you progress through your career, you'll find it's harder and harder and harder to find new jobs. So this is one of the reasons why you don't want to burn bridges at all in general, right? But especially when you start your first jobs, because those relationships and friendships you build with those people, they're going to end up usually going to another company and another bank. And if you need a job as you progress through your career, right, and you start getting towards the upper end, a lot of these roles don't get posted online. So if you start looking online for director, senior director, executives, heads of departments, things like that, they usually don't post those online. And the reason being is they either exclusively use recruiters, which is how they do it, or a lot of times they rely on their networks and their contacts. So they go, okay, 10, 20 years ago, I worked with these people. They worked at other banks. They've all built solid careers. I'm looking for someone, let's say to run a validation department or an MR model risk management kind of team, right? Validation management is all the same. But you're building this team out, and then you, a lot of times, I need someone to come in at like a director level, right? I don't just want to hire anyone, right? I need someone that's going to be a really good fit, that's going to work well with me if I'm another director or if I'm like the head of the department. And so to do this, right, you don't want to interview 50, 60, 70 candidates. It's hard to see on a resume experience. And then again, as you get towards the top, there's less and less and less qualified people. So it gets more challenging. So a lot of times it's important to look through your contacts and try to find someone that you know or someone that you've heard of, or maybe you just find someone on LinkedIn that has all this experience and they know someone you know. At that point, right, in the senior portions of your career, you need to build these relationships because that's what's going to get the jobs. It's easier to hire when you know somebody. I know their performance. I know their work ethic. I worked with them maybe 10 years ago, but now they went on to be, let's say senior associates and like associate director, vice president, things like that. And they've done it really well. And I really need someone to fit that role. And I'd love to have them work with me right? That's when those opportunities and that networking comes in. Again, it's not just hiring people because you know them. And yes, this does happen. And yes, it drives me nuts. And I think it's ridiculous. And yes, everybody in the entire corporation, everyone around will notice this person is vastly underqualified because they were essentially hired for knowing someone. I do not recommend this. I do not encourage this at all. Now it just makes you look stupid and you essentially burn bridges with other people. You waste your social capital, meaning that, right, you've built this relationship. And as I mentioned, on your worst days or the days that no one's looking, you've been working hard and getting things done. This is where people look at you and say, wow, you're like a real loser. You don't really care about the company. You don't know what you're doing. And that's when you burn bridges. And that's when you dead end a lot of senior careers because you're not doing what's best for the company. And that's what you're being paid to do. So anyways, just in this career here, though, looking at the beginning, it's okay to jump around a little bit more. As you get more towards the end of it, it's going to be harder and harder to jump around. So I encourage you to look at important factors like what cities do you want to live in, what industries do you want to be in, what positions do you want to be in. Again, looking at company culture, like we talked about at the beginning, do you see a clear path? Is there a way to get forward, right? You're not going to obviously see that like, oh, in 2 years I'll get this promotion, and in 5 years I'll get this promotion, and then this will happen. Companies shift, people leave, things happen. It's really hard when teams shift though as well, which I'll mention here at the end. Just because you've built these relationships, and then when people leave, it makes your job more challenging because now you got to start over from scratch and meet new people and build those relationships and try to figure out what you have in common. And sometimes you won't click. It's a challenge. Trust me, I know it's happened quite a bit. But anyways, just to wrap this up here though, right? Relationships are crucial. So we talked a lot about networking here and building these relationships, finding commonalities that aren't even at work, trying to work with other people is important. Again, I didn't emphasize a lot in here, but building your skills is also important, as we kind of mentioned. Being better at your job will help you also get ahead, because if you can do the job, you can do it well, and you work well with people, you'll be just an all-star overall. And then leaving a company, it's going to happen. Beginning of your career, you should probably be leaving a little more frequently if you need to. If you find a good fit, there's no reason why you shouldn't stay in the long run. It's great to find somewhere that's stable, that fits you well. So that's an important fact. But again, not jumping to new jobs just for the money, looking at the environment, looking at the culture, and then doing it professionally. So when you do leave, be professional, put in your 2 weeks, right? Don't tell anybody about it until after you've already talked to your manager and you've put in your official notice. And then again, you'd start this process over again. So with the new job, then you'd start working on building relationships, getting your job done, learning the new systems, and going through that again and again. And then finally here, just topping it up here, realize that in the long run, you're going to need people for promotions, and you're going to need people to realize you're a good worker and a good employee. If you're not, you're going to get stuck in the bottom tiers, and this happens quite a bit, where people either get a late start in a career, so it's just hard to get ahead, which I've seen, or they just don't network and work well with other people, and so it's stunted their career. And a lot of times it's hard to break into that management role. And then even after you get into the management role, it seems like you can never get out because you haven't built a lot of those industry and network contacts. So those are the takeaways from this podcast here. I appreciate you guys listening. I'm going to put a link below as well. If you would like to donate, buy me a coffee, I'll put a link below to that. But as always, until next time.